I welcome you all to the lecture series on the generic elective Individual and Society offered by the Department of English across the various colleges of University of Delhi. My name is Piyush Chaudhary, Assistant Professor at the Department of English at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. In the previous lecture, I gave an introduction to the paper Individual and Society. I will obviously attach the link in the description box below so that students can take a look at the first introductory lecture that I gave, and it will set in motion and which will put in context the entire paper, that is Individual and Society. In the first lecture, I discussed the importance of this paper and how students will be able to read the society and the various aspects of our society, and how both the individual and the society, they both affect each other. In that lecture, this is what I discussed. So that was basically an introductory lecture. I also discussed that the students will be able to achieve critical thinking capabilities related to certain aspects of their society, for example, such as gender, class, caste, violence, globalization, so on and so forth. I would suggest you all to look at that first lecture first to get a better understanding of what this paper has to offer. Now, in this lecture today, the one that I am currently taking, I'll be discussing the theme of caste, which is one unit amongst the various units that are there in the syllabus. This lecture will be therefore on the topic of caste. Now, if we ever talk about one major issue in our society, and an issue which provides almost, which pervades almost every aspect of our society, then it surely has to be caste. Today I'll give you an introduction of what is Dalit literature and what really constitutes Dalit literature. But first, what is the word Dalit? What does it mean? So the word Dalit basically means ground down or depressed or broken. Basically, this is the term that Dalit is a term which is an officially recognized term, which is preferred by the politicized, members of the scheduled caste rather than any other designation. Right? So this word, as we all know, was popularized by, obviously, the father of the Indian Constitution, the great Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And any other term, even Harijan, is not acceptable, to the members of the scheduled caste. So as we all know, it was Mahatma Gandhi who popularized the term Harijan, but it was deemed certainly, it was deemed patronizing, and hence it was refuted, and it was never accepted as an official term. Right? So now there is also a certain amount of pride which is associated with this term Dalit, because it is a means to accept oneself, because there is no denying the fact that the historically untouchables, the untouchables, they were oppressed by others, by members of the upper caste, by members of the forward castes since thousands of years. This is why today, the term Dalit is a political term, and it is the only acceptable term for members of the scheduled caste. Isn't it? So I would say, to speak, now let's go forward to the idea of Dalit literature. To speak very simply and to simplify things for the students, for the viewers, basically the literature related to expressing, the experience of the lower castes, that is what is Dalit literature. On that note, let me very briefly discuss some of the major features of Dalit literature, and this is important. Now, one very important feature of Dalit literature is its collectiveness and its collective expression. So as we all know, there is this popular critic, Mr. Sharan Kumar Limbale. Let me show you on the screen a quote by, Sharan Kumar Limbale. And as you can see on the screen now, the quote says, "A unique feature of Dalit literature is its collective aspect. For this reason, it is alleged that there is no individual in Dalit literature." So you see the experiences, the pains, the happiness, the oppressions, etc. These things are all common to all of them. Hence, suffering is evident in the literature written by Dalits. So Dalit literature expresses the social evils which were endured by all the Dalits, and it tends to take the form of a collective expression, a complete collective expression. So when the experience expressed in Dalit literature is that of an individual, then it appears to be of an entire group, of an entire section of society. Therefore, I can say, with some amount of surety, of course, that Dalit literature is never exclusive, but rather it is inclusive of an entire section which was not given equal opportunities since generations. So let me now give you another very important, quote, a very popular quote by Arjun Dangle, who himself is a noted literary critic and a Dalit writer. According to Arjun Dangle, and I am quoting him, Dalit literature is associated with a movement to bring about change. So you see, the purpose of Dalit literature is social, it is not for entertainment. Another purpose of Dalit literature is to exert the Dalit identity, basically to bring about a change. It's a movement to bring about a change. It's a movement to assert their own identity. And when we talk about identity, of course, when we read Hira Bansode's poem, and we'll be coming to that poem very shortly, the idea of assertion of one's identity is very much visible in Hira Bansode's poem. Now, another feature that you would notice is the language. The language is very plain, it's very direct, because Dalit literature is talking about oppression, it's talking about humiliation, it's talking about pains that the society inflicted on one particular section by another one particular section. So these are some issues and some points of discussion that I'll be obviously taking up in the subsequent lectures and in depth when I start with Hira Bansode's poem Bosom Friend. So on this note, let me start with this discussion of this poem Bosom Friend by Hira Bansode. But before that, let me discuss very briefly, I'll very briefly touch on the idea of Dalit poetry. Literature is not just about studying a particular text and summarizing and understanding the various summaries and the various the action of that particular text, but rather it's much more than that. We have to also understand the movement, the formation of poetry, the features of poetry. That is also important. So Dalit poetry was basically meant to agitate the masses, to revolutionize the masses. The vocabulary of Dalit poetry is dominated by what we call the idea of Dalit Chetna or Dalit consciousness. So that Dalit consciousness is present in Hira Bansode's poem. The language obviously, and when we talk about Dalit poetry, the language is unpolished. It's sometimes it's crude, it's direct, it's very hard hitting, and it's far removed. It's far removed from the cultivated grammar of the elite literature. Okay, so this is one major difference between Dalit poetry and other poetry. Dalit poetry does not follow the traditional stereotypical norms of normal poetry. The idea is to break away from normativity. The idea is to break free from oppression and marginalization. So this is the core of Dalit literature. So the poetry that we will read now will be very direct. It will be very hard hitting. It will be very simple also. The language will be very simple. There is no unnecessary embellishments. It's very straightforward. It's audacious. It's unpolished. But why is it so? It's audacious, it's unpolished, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's hard-hitting because the subject matter is not love. It is not a rosy picture that the poet is drawing, right? It's rather about social change. It's about humiliation. It's about oppression. It's about abuse and marginalization that, faced by one section of society. So the language also becomes different, right? So one must understand that Dalit literature is very markedly different from other forms of high and elite literature that you may have studied till now, right? So this is why this particular section has been added to the syllabus offered by the Department of English at University of Delhi. This is because Dalit expressions are extremely vital in understanding the social fabric of our nation and of our society. We cannot claim to make any study of our society without including such aspects such as disability or caste or class or gender, so on and so forth. Let me now come to the discussion of the poem Bosom Friend by Hira Bansode, a prominent Dalit woman poet. She holds a special place within the entire oeuvre of Dalit literature because it gives voice to the pains of Dalit women and it gives their voice an expression. So this poem, Bosom Friend, I'll start with this poem now. It challenges Savarna. It challenges Savarna feminism and it offers a critique of what? Of patriarchy and also intra-caste patriarchy. So thereby it is revealing the nuanced politics of Dalit feminism, right? So from here, line by line, I'll be reading the entire poem by Hira Bansode and I'll be using the text. I hope you also have the text with you, and as we know, this is the text that is being prescribed by the University of Delhi, the Individual and Society. But before I begin with the text, let me ask you one simple question. How deep do you think are the roots of the caste system in our society? So the answer to this question lies in the poem Bosom Friend by Hira Bansode. The answer to this is that the roots of caste are deeply entrenched. It is not easy to eradicate, and this particular poem is an attempt to show how the roots of caste are so deep that superficial markers might not be able to erase it. right? It also shows how caste is very deeply internalized within the social fabric and how society more or less even today still looks at them as unequals. Let me start reading the poem on this note, and as you can see, the first line. Today you came over to dinner for the first time. You not only came, you forgot your caste and came. Usually women don't forget that tradition of inequality, but you came with a mind as large as the sky to my pocket-sized house. So did you notice the keywords that are being used here? Look at the keywords, and these keywords show a marked reluctance in Hira's friend, her bosom friend, who forgot her caste and then came to Hira's home. So Hira says that today her old friend, her very good friend, her bosom friend, perhaps her best friend, came for dinner for the very first time by forgetting her caste. So reference to forgetting the caste is basically the poet's way of showing and insidiously showing how her friend, whom she refers to as her best friend or her bosom friend, came to her house for the very first time by forgetting her caste. This means that in the long association between the two friends, the woman, the upper caste woman, never came to her house. Why so? Obviously, the answer is very simple, because of the stereotypical notion of and because she considers herself as an upper caste, so she will not go to Hira Bansode's house. Notice the words, and I'll repeat the word. The words are, you came with a mind as large as the sky to my pocket size house. A mind as large as sky to my pocket size house. So look at the juxtaposition of two opposing symbols. Something which is as large as the sky, a mind, and then coming to her pocket sized house. Obviously she is a poor woman. Hira Bansode is not a rich woman who has a big house. So maybe this reference to a mind as large as the sky, it talks about the open-mindedness of the upper caste friend. But this open-mindedness is not evident through her actions. So the first four lines which we just now read make it very clear that the friend is a member of the upper caste, and she came perhaps reluctantly by somehow forgetting the lower caste status of Hira Bansode. Right? So you're getting what exactly is happening here. So let us now go forward and look at the other lines. The poet says, I thought you had ripped out all those caste things. You came bridging that chasm that divides us. Truly, friend, I was really happy. Notice the word thought and notice the word ripped out. So this shows the stress on the word ripped out. Ripped out shows a tone of calm anger that is there in the poet, Hira Bansode. So clearly, the poet is saying that she thought that her friend has forgotten the differences between their different castes, but very soon she will be disappointed. Next, the chasm, the gap that divides them, it refers to the caste. The chasm is the different caste that they both belong to. One belongs to the upper caste, one belongs to the lower caste. This is the chasm, the difference that divides them. And the poet says that she was very happy that she has forgotten her caste and that she has bridged that gap of caste and she has come to her home for dinner. Okay. Look at the next lines. As you can see, the next line says, with the naive devotion of Shabri, I arrange the food on your plate. Look at the image and the symbol that she is using. She is saying that with the naive devotion of Shabri. So she is giving a higher status to her friend. And she is saying that like Shabri in Ramayana, the poet is so much devoted to her friend. And thereby she is also giving her friend an equivalent status of Lord Ram. So the devotion that Shabri had for Lord Ram is similar to the devotion that Hira has for her bosom friend. But unlike Lord Ram, who himself is the great Maryada Purushottam, and unlike Lord Ram, who never believed in caste, and unlike Lord Ram, who accepted the half-eaten, the half-tasted bare fruits, bare ke phal of Shabri, Hira's friend will not accept it at all. So essentially, Hira is giving a higher status to her friend, almost equating her to the status of Lord Ram, but she is nowhere close to the Maryada Purushottam, because the Maryada Purushottam did not believe in caste and did not believe in downgrading Shabri just because she was from a lower caste. So even though, as we all know, in the popular Ramayana, it was his younger brother Lord Lakshman who did not like his elder brother Lord Ram eating and accepting the half-eaten bare fruits. And that is why Prabhu Ram is known as Maryada Purushottam, because he accepted it, because he knew that Shabari is devoted and worshipped him dearly, and therefore caste is no bar for him. Caste is no bar for Lord Ram. But unlike Shabari, the poet Hira will get the shock of her life very soon. Look at these lines, the next lines that she speaks. And the lines are, "But the moment you looked at the plate, your face changed. With a smirk you said, 'Oh my, do you serve chutney Koshambir this way? You still don't know how to serve food. Truly, you folk will never improve.'" So you see the highly rude, the highly discriminating, highly patronizing, highly discriminating manner in which her best friend, her bosom friend, talks to her. So these lines show the attitude of the upper caste friend, who in a way thought that she is doing a great service by coming and eating at Hira Bansode's house. So once again, notice the stress on the word with a smirk, as if making fun of Hira. Notice the stress on the word, and you still don't know how to serve food. Truly you folk will never improve, she says. So basically, through these words, the poet is showing how the upper caste pretends to treat them as equals, but still look down on them as low caste and as lesser human beings. It is unfortunate. Okay. Look at the next stanza. "I was ashamed, really ashamed. My hand, which had just touched the sky, was knocked down. I was silent. Towards the end of the meal, you asked, 'What's this? Don't you serve buttermilk or yogurt with the last course of rice?' Oh, my dear, we can't do without that. The last bit of my courage fell away like a falling star. I was sad, then numb. But the next moment, I came back to life. A stone dropped in the water stirs up things on the bottom, so my memories swarm up in my mind. Dear friend, you ask about buttermilk and yogurt. What and how can I tell you?" So in this entire stanza, notice the stress on the word "my hand, which had just touched the sky, was knocked down." So the hand knocking down, this is showing that she was disillusioned now with a force, with a violent force. She believed that she had touched the sky by inviting her friend, and she was very happy. She was almost proud of the fact that her upper caste friend has come to her home, but now her hand was violently knocked down. So it shows her disappointment and how getting close to the upper caste can only lead to, it's some sort of an implicit violence, physical or verbal, right? So also in this stanza that I just now read, notice how her upper caste friend looks down upon her for serving her meal in a particular way. So Hira was very happy, excited to have her upper caste friend, and she gave all her love, all the best food that she had. But her upper caste friend treated her in a patronizing manner, in a humiliating manner, in a condescending manner. Such is the level of disappointment of Hira Bansode. Of course, she was upset, she was sad, but look at the next lines, she was numb. She says, "I was sad, then numb, but the next moment I came back to life." So look at the image that she uses again, and look at these lines again, as you can see on the screen. "A stone dropped in the water stirs up things on the bottom, so my memories swarm up in my mind." And therefore, the memories of her poor childhood came back to her mind. And then she says that in her childhood, they did not even have milk to drink because they were extremely poor. They could not even afford a proper meal in the day. She then explains that she was able to afford only bread, which they used to have with water, So this was the level of poverty. The next stanza will describe exactly that. So the memories are coming to her mind. This was the level of poverty that the untouchables, the lower caste, had to face on a day-to-day basis because of the discrimination that they had been subjected to, by members of the forward caste. In the next stanza, which is the final stanza, the poet Hira very powerfully uses several symbols to show and to contrast the poverty and the despicable conditions of living, of the lower castes, and she contrasts it with the upper castes. Look at these lines now, to understand this. And the third stanza begins from here. In my childhood, we didn't even have milk for tea, much less yogurt or buttermilk. My mother cooked on sawdust she brought from the lumberyard, wiping away the smoke from her eyes. Every once in a while, we might get garlic chutney on coarse bread, otherwise we just ate bread crumbled in water. Dear friend, Shrikhand was not even a word in our vocabulary. My nose had never smelled the fragrance of ghee. My tongue had never tasted halwa, basundi. Right? So these are some really tasty dishes. So when through these lines, we get an idea of the poverty-stricken life and the poverty, the childhood, the poor childhood that Hira Bansode had lived. And these lines also contrast the highly insensitive and the rude and the patronizing and the humiliating manner in which her best friend treated her. Next comes one of the most powerful lines of the poem. Look at these lines. She says, "Dear friend, you have not discarded your tradition. Its roots go deep in your mind, and that's true, true friend. There's yogurt on the last course of rice today. The arrangement of food on your plate was not properly ordered. Are you going to tell me what mistakes I made? Are you going to tell me my mistakes?" So in these lines, Hira clearly mentioned that yogurt was there, but it was just not properly ordered. Because these conventions of ordering the food at the right time and conventions of having a 3-course or 2-course meal is something which the untouchables were not at all privileged with, because they barely had food to eat in their childhood and in their adulthood, right? Also, notice the play on the word that, very wonderfully, very wittily, Hira has used these lines. She says, "Dear friend, you have not discarded your tradition. Its roots go deep in your mind, and that's true, true, true friend." Look at the beautiful way, the ingenious way, I would say, that these lines are written. They serve a dual purpose. So there are multiple meanings to this. Firstly, it says that the roots of caste go deep in the mind, and that is very true. Secondly, the poet says, true friend. So notice the word play on the word true friend. True, true friend, she says. So the poet throws in a dash of irony every now and then in the poem. So this young woman, she's referring to her as a true friend, her bosom friend. But her true friend, her bosom friend, mistreats her so badly, and also the roots go very deep, and that is also very true. Right? So it is a unique way of writing. It shows the prowess of the poet in writing so beautifully and in such an ingeniously unique manner. It is, it's a brilliant display of wit and clever wordplay by Hira Bansode. Now look at the last lines, the concluding lines. "Today the arrangement of food on your plate was not properly ordered. Are you going to tell me my mistakes?" So in the concluding lines, the poem ends with a little feeling of indignation and anger. You can almost feel a suppressed anger, in the final lines of the poem. So there is a sense of surprised, there is a sense of this suppressed and a calm anger in the poet Hira, when she asks that, "Are you going to tell me the mistakes that I made?" Right? So this is the end of the poem. The poem, as we all know, is about the unchanging attitude of upper castes and the hypocrisy of the so-called educated upper caste, who on the surface show that they are sympathetic towards the lower castes, but treat them with indignation, contempt, hatred, discrimination, or you can say through the way in which Hira has been treated, with a certain amount of disgust and hatred. It shows how caste is so insidiously present in our day-to-day fabric today, and how caste is extremely difficult to eradicate. It also shows how the roots of caste are so deeply entrenched that in the beginning I mentioned that superficial markers will not be able to erase it. And therefore, reading literature related to Dalits is extremely important to understand the social fabric that we live in. Also, you will notice that, just a few concluding remarks, there is a marked sense of force, there is a sense of passion in Hira's poetry. At times it appears ironic, at times straightforward, at times direct, at times scathing. So this is the power of the poem, as there are multiple emotional conflicts going on in the mind of the poet, and this finds its expression in the same way in which it is written, that is in multiple tones, right? So there is calmness, there is a calm anger, there is irony, there is directness. So these are the multiple conflicts that is going on. So there is an implicit anger, a tone of indignation in the poet for being treated in such a way. Notice that and feel that while you read the poem. Words such as ripped out, the moment you looked at the plate, face changed, etc. I thought you forgot your caste. So through these words, it is clear that there is a hidden anger in the poet. And the last two lines, the concluding lines of the poem, show the same. Also, you will notice that celestial imagery is being used, reference to the mind as large as the sky, my hand touched the sky, it was knocked down, the courage fell away like a falling star. So these images represent a sad fall from happiness to sadness, of dejection, upon being abused and humiliated, you know, so of a hope which is lost, of a devastated hopes. Her hopes were shattered. She was very happy to have her friend over, you know, and all her hopes came falling down. So that is pretty much the poem and the various topics that I touched on. Let me now very briefly discuss the title Bosom Friend. The readers by now, if you have listened to my lecture closely, I have referred to the fact that Hira Bansode herself refers to her friend as the bosom friend. What does bosom friend means? Bosom means someone's chest, so someone whom you keep very close to yourself, someone whom you can hug. So basically it's just another way of referring to a best friend. Okay, bosom friend means a very good friend, a very best friend. But do the readers and do the viewers of this lecture, do you guys believe that this upper caste woman is really a close friend of Hira? Do you think so? Absolutely not. Never. The poet is saying that it is far from true. So the title itself is an ironic commentary on the closeness of their relationship. So that pretty much sums up our discussion on this poem by Hira Bansode. I hope that the students, the research scholars, or any general viewer watching this video was able to take some valuable insights from this poem by Hira Bansode. I hope I gave you some food for thought about how deeply entrenched caste is in our everyday society. It was great to have you in this long lecture. I'll be taking subsequent lectures on the other topics. Next in line will be, caste laws by Jyotirao Phule. Then we have Deliverance by Premchand. Then we have Jhutan by, the very popular, Dalit Dalit writer Om Prakash Valmiki. Jhutan is an autobiography. We will then also be reading Who Were the Shudras by B.R. Ambedkar, which is a research work. It's an essay, part of a long book by B.R. Ambedkar. And lastly, we'll be discussing Kallu by Ismat Chugtai. So I will see you all in the subsequent lectures. Thank you so much for being with me. Please share this video amongst your friends and students from other colleges of the University of Delhi. I hope it helps them as much as it helped you. Thank you so much for tuning in at Hansraj e-Samvaad. Good luck, goodbye, Jai Hind.